I was born in 2003, meaning I've owned a GameCube, a PS2, a Wii, Xbox 360, PS4, Xbox One, PS5, a slew of handhelds, and about 4 gaming PCs in the past 2 decades. I've been playing games since I can remember, with some of my earliest and fondest memories surrounding titles like Super Smash Bros. Melee, the LEGO Star Wars and the LEGO Batman games, Call of Duty, etc. As a kid, video games were magic, and I mean that literally. They weren't a combination of code, assets, and animations. They were these separate worlds that you could interact with through a simple controller. That intangible feeling of falling into a video game was one of the best feelings that there was. I feel like my experiences in some regards were unique to the era that they happened in. The late 2000s and early 2010s were effectively a renaissance of video games, and anyone who grew up in that era or the one preceding know what I mean. Before hitting double digits, I was able to play Wii Sports, Super Smash Bros., Batman Arkham Asylum, and Pokemon Silver and Gold. I don't bring this era of video games up to gatekeep the experience of video games. I feel like late Gen Z and Gen Alpha still have plenty of amazing titles to explore and experience, such as Spider-Man for the PS4 and PS5, and the slew of really impressive creations on Roblox. The reason I bring up that era of video games, though, is because, to me, it marks the sunset of the era of video games with heart. So, what do I mean when I say video games with heart? Well, to give a full definition, I think it's important to look at some of the games I believe have heart to them, as well as the ones that don't. I recently went back and replayed Batman Arkham City for the first time since my dad bought it for his Xbox 360. I was amazed to find that the gameplay and graphics still really held up and provided for a fun, immersive experience. Furthermore, I found that the game didn't overstay its welcome, with a main story that had a good length, interesting drivers, and good mission progression. In addition, for those who really loved the game, there was a huge focus on meaningful side content with the Zaz missions, the Hush storyline, and the introduction of Deadshot. Basically, the game had a lot to offer to its mainstream players, as well as its more devoted fans, and gave the same level of attention to both. Arkham City really shows its heart when you play the side content. Having been slighted by modern DLC, I subconsciously expected the DLC to be a cash grab. You play as Tim Drake's Robin, on a mission to find a recently captured Batman. When I started playing, I didn't realize it, but I expected all of Robin's moves to be poor copies of Batman's, with no nuance attached to the quick actions and finishers. I was almost shocked when I pressed the finisher button for the first time and saw a whole new animation that was entirely different from Batman's. Then I pressed the quick action buttons, and all of them were unique to Robin. I couldn't help but ask myself why this was such a shock. Until I thought back on all the DLC that I had bought in the last couple of years that had just added a few small, maybe even unfinished things to the game they were attached to, like with any of the most recent Assassin's Creed games. I wasn't used to games that had DLC for reasons beyond money, DLCs that existed for the player and were born out of passion. Arkham City is really a game that was born from passion for the series and the character, and it shows. When you play the game, you can feel the love for the world of Batman that the creators had, with subtle hints to lesser-known characters that unfold throughout the side missions, and a focus on the true character of Batman himself. Rocksteady really knocked it out of the park with this series, which is why, unfortunately, I was excited when it announced they had a new project in the works. Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. I, like many people my age, had no clue who the Suicide Squad were until 2016 when David Ayer's Suicide Squad hit theaters. I remember really wanting to like the movie. As a 13-year-old with a 17-year-old brother, the edginess, at the time relevant dubstep tracks, and overall angst served as the perfect honeypot. Despite being young, even I knew the movie sucked after seeing it. Which is why I was pleasantly surprised a few years later when James Gunn, director of my favorite MCU property, Guardians of the Galaxy, was announced as doing a follow-up, soft reboot of the Suicide Squad. Having finally been given the Suicide Squad I was hoping for back in 2016, I was hooked on the characters and concept. When I heard Rocksteady was going to take a stab at adapting these characters into a video game, having seen what a talented team could do with the IP, I couldn't help but be excited. So excited that I broke a rule I have, and I pre-ordered it the night before release so that I could play it first thing the next day. However, when I looked at the pre-order content that came with it, I noticed it said Battle Pass tokens. Now, to clarify, in the time between when the game was announced and the first trailers were shown, I moved, and I started a new job, which meant I fell behind on media surrounding the game. In fact, the only thing I saw about the game for a while was the IGN review complaining about the Flash being too fast. Needless to say, my expectations for the game hadn't been tainted since I hadn't kept up with the coverage. The first negative I really knew about the game was in that moment, seeing that there would be a battle pass. My heart sank. I knew Rocksteady for their amazing work on single-player, open-world experiences that really dived into the depths of what worlds they were adapting. Now, knowing there was going to be a live service game, I felt like I was in store for a Marvel's Avenger type instead of a spiritual successor to the Arkham series. And now, a month later, I can't say that I was wrong. One of my biggest disappointments when it came to Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League was its lacking story. The story itself is pretty much a one-to-one rip from Injustice 2, with slight changes here and there, along with a bunch of fan service that doesn't really serve the plot. Most egregiously, in my opinion, is that it doesn't do any character development or really develop the relationships between any of the members of the Suicide Squad. Overall, the game has a very obvious over-reliance on its IP, something that's visible in a lot of other very obvious AAA ripoffs, or, worse yet, sequels. For example, you could look at pretty much any Ubisoft game. One of my big issues with Suicide Squad's story is its lack of character development. It kind of hopes that you, as the player, have seen the Suicide Squad movies, or at least have some background knowledge on the characters, and then use that knowledge to fill in the gaps. It's an over-reliance on IP, something that I think is a problem in not just adaptations, but also series of games such as Assassin's Creed or Far Cry. Let's talk a bit more about Ubisoft's games. Let's start with Assassin's Creed. My first Assassin's Creed game was Assassin's Creed 3, which at the time was so cool to me that it made me want to buy and play the entire Ezio collection, as well as Black Flag. And later down the line, that good impression even made me want to buy Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and Mirage. Every game that I listed after Black Flag was so unbearably boring to me that I didn't finish it. Please make note of the fact that I didn't finish the game. I will be avoiding story criticisms as I don't know how the story ends, but I will be making gameplay criticisms from the sections of the game that I did play. Starting with Origins and Odyssey, I honestly couldn't tell them apart based solely off of their gameplay loop. The combat and the side missions that I did play were almost exactly the same. Valhalla started out really strong. But as soon as the setting changed from the really unique icy landscapes to the boring, tired-out British landscapes with too many map markers to count, I uninstalled, and I never went back. Mirage was my light at the end of the tunnel, with a promise of returning to form and getting back to classic Assassin's Creed, but at that point, I didn't really want a return to form. I wanted innovation in an exciting way, not another million map markers in a tired gameplay loop. I encourage you, go back and play the old Assassin's Creed games, like Assassin's Creed 2 or 3. You can feel the passion, the heart that went into those games. Play Assassin's Creed Valhalla and ask yourself if any of that passion is still there, or if the game is another full-price AAA title that was cranked out to meet a quota. Another one of Ubisoft's really popular game franchises is Far Cry. And let me ask you something. Have you ever played Far Cry 3? It's amazing. It's genuinely fun, and it's in a really cool setting. It has so many cool gameplay systems to explore, like the hunting, crafting, and map discovery systems, all of which were new at the time. As I was playing it, I thought back to Far Cry 6, funny enough. And besides having bigger names like Giancarlo Esposito, there was nothing new in the newer games. Nothing had changed in the 6 Do you know that there were 6 games in between Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 6? Anyway, nothing had changed in the 6 games that had come out since Far Cry 3. Now, personally, I liked Far Cry 4 and 5, but I acknowledge that their gameplay was, in effect, nothing new in reference to playing Far Cry 3. By Far Cry 6, I was tired and bored, and I think most of Ubisoft's playbase would agree. Now, I'm in my 20s, and I'm much more critical of the media I enjoy nowadays than I was when I was a child. I'm sure that had I been born 20 years earlier, by 2003, I would be complaining about how the Mario franchise was tired and tapped. However, I do truly believe that we are living in a post-passion era in the AAA space. Excluding some really great titles, such as any of the From Software games, the Spider-Man games, the God of War revival, and possibly a few others, AAA studios are beating their dead horses. I don't want to see another Far Cry come out until they have something new to say. I don't want another Rocksteady title until it has something new to bring to the table. I don't need another tired game in a series. What we as players need is passion and heart. Now, I don't want to end on doom and gloom. There are some really amazing games that have come out, and I think we've moved into the indie renaissance of video games. Games like Hollow Knight, Lethal Company, Pal World, if you can look past its controversy, Overcooked, and Lies of P are some examples of amazing games that have come out in the past 10 years that have, in my opinion, blown AAA titles out of the water. There's passion out there, and that's something we should all be excited about. Unreal Engine is free, and if you have an interest in game design, start there, and we'll all be waiting in anticipation to see what projects you come up with. I personally love video games, and I have my whole life. I believe that the industry heads are trying to milk every last dollar out of these dedicated fan bases, and that's a problem. I encourage you, the player, to look for some budding developers. Throw them a few bucks if you can afford it. And to developers, thank you for sharing your heart and passion with us. We appreciate your struggle against the Heartless Titans. You are seen, and we are grateful. Before I completely wrap up, I would like to say one last note. I have no malice towards any specific individual developer, designer, or any person working at these development studios. Decisions to make, in my opinion, bad and heartless games probably aren't coming from a normal person just trying to make a living working on video games. I also acknowledge that those people do probably have passion and love for the work that they're doing. My point isn't about them, it's about the large executives that are making decisions that are overall harming the play base and overall harming people in general. Developers of any size, whether that be indie or someone working on a team at a AAA, someone working completely alone, you are appreciated. You are seen, and again, we are entirely grateful for all the work you do, no matter where you end up doing it. And thank you to anyone who watched this. It's probably mostly going to be friends and family, but I appreciate it. I've been thinking about making something pseudo video essay-like for a while, and I appreciate you stopping by. I would like to specifically thank my partner for discussing these topics with me, as well as my friend Tayo, who drew the avatar that you've been seeing on screen. I appreciate both of you, as well as anyone else who's discussed or watched or shared this video. I'm hopefully going to be able to make some more in the future, and I really hope you stick around for that. Thank you guys, and I hope you have an amazing day.